I hate flying. Despise it with a burning passion. And why wouldn't I? What's to like about being trapped in a flimsy metal structure that rattles and threatens to fall apart at the seams every time it encounters a sudden gust of wind? A teeny tiny bird could get sucked into its engines, and this hulking monstrosity would immediately crash and explode into a ball of fire. 1 second, one error, one slight miscalculation. That's all it would take for your entire existence to be reduced to a simple statistic. Lost at sea. Flight recorder not found. Search is still on. I do not want my name to be associated with these sentences. No thanks. Gonna call me a pussy for having a perfectly rational fear? Well, that's just fine and dandy with me. Now, this fear isn't the only thing I loathe about flying. It's everything else, too. Cramped seats with no leg space, crying babies, surly toddlers kicking the back of my seat, stale air limp with a stench of sweaty socks and warm liquor, loud conversations of drunk middle-aged assholes. God, I hate it. Fate truly has a cruel, cruel sense of irony that I got saddled with a job that involves so much flying. If the pay wasn't so good, I swear I would have fucked off a long time ago. But even money only goes so far, because no amount of zeros in my paycheck can convince me to get back inside of an airplane after what I saw that night. My experience on that flight struck me with such a life-changing terror that I quit my job the second that damn plane landed, and promised to myself that I would never, ever fly again. Ever. It was another one of those cheap red-eye flights that I like to catch after my business trips. I marginally preferred traveling at night. Granted that the noise situation wasn't all that better. Loud snores that sounded like the sputtering of dying trucks replaced petulant shrieks of little brats. But at least I didn't have to look out at a sea of swirling clouds floating beneath the plane like a thick white mist, reminding me of just how far away I was from solid ground. I was curled up under a musty blanket, having a fitful sleep full of nightmares of the fuselage being torn apart with my chair and I being sucked out into the air in the blink of an eye. That's when the plane hit a particularly nasty turbulence. The tremors woke me with a jolt, set my heart racing. I dug my fingers into the armrests, pressed my lips together and squeezed my eyes shut, only blinking them open when the rattling had passed. I let out a deep breath as my eyes wandered. Fuck. But the old woman next to me just slept through the whole thing. I felt so envious of her open-mouthed snores. This jealousy would only get magnified when I would later look back on what happened next. I turned my neck, looked out the window. Seated near the middle of the plane, I could clearly see the wing outside. It was lit up by wing scan lights and had a couple of strobe lights flashing beneath it near its tip. Standard stuff. Satisfied that nothing seemed wrong, I began to tear my gaze off the view outside and froze. There was something there. Startled, I leaned forward, pressed my face up against the glass and narrowed my eyes. Cold sweat trickled down the back of my neck when I saw it again. A dark sheet of cloth, tattered, frayed, fluttering from the edge of the wing like it'd gotten caught on something there. What the fuck? How did it get there? How come no one noticed? And how in the world had it managed to stay up there for so long? No sooner had the thought crossed my mind did that rag disappear, slithered off the edge and vanished into the velvety sky. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for the cloth to fly off into the engine, setting it ablaze. But nothing happened. I could feel the tension releasing from my body in waves, making me shiver. Whatever that was, it was gone. Posed no threat to my safety anymore. I decided to wait until next morning to inform the flight attendants about what I just saw and began slumping back into the chair. and then I saw it again out of the corner of my eye. It was closer this time, about halfway down the length of the wing, just fluttering against the roaring wind, right at the edge. I rubbed my eyes, pinched my arm. No, I wasn't dreaming. It really was there. How did it travel halfway up the wing? Shouldn't that be impossible? My head swam as I saw something breaking all laws of physics that had been the cornerstones of my perception and understanding of reality. But of course, that was just the beginning of this horrendous nightmare. For right the next second, something shot out from within the waving folds of the black cloth and latched onto the top side of the wing. It was so bizarre, so fucking impossible that it took me a second to recognize it. It was a human arm. I gasped. Loudly, I think, because I didn't notice it. The only thing I could hear at the time was my muscle-tearing beat of my heart against my sternum. Was that a person there? My question was immediately answered as another arm shot up and landed on the top of the wing. My tongue darted out of my mouth, licked my cracked lips as I wondered how in the ever-loving fuck this person was maintaining their grip on the smooth surface of a plane that was shooting through the air 35,000 feet above the ground. I watched the veins on the two thin arms get stretched to the point of snapping as the entire body got gradually pulled up. A head popped up, small, round, with long dark hair spilling over the face, trying to tear themselves off her scalp and fly off to the side. It was a woman. She had thick, blood-red lips framing a mouth that was opening and closing. Opening and closing. Fast. So damn fast that it was pretty much a blur. Was she speaking? No. The movement was too fast, too rhythmic for that. She pulled her torso up, then her legs, until she was flying flat on the wing. Her mouth never stopped moving, even as her matted locks flew into it and got crushed between her teeth. And her eyes. Dear God, her eyes. Full of rage. Every blood vessel in them had popped. I was terrified and confused. Did she need my help, or was I in danger? The sight was making my brain short-circuit. Then she moved towards me, like a lizard. A really fucking fast lizard, one whose mouth never stopped its bizarre motion. Within seconds, she was on me, stood up outside my window, pressed her face up against the glass, hair lashing around wildly. And that's when I heard it, and finally understood what she was doing with her mouth. It was her teeth. They were chattering. I don't know how, but I was able to hear the sound of her teeth gnashing repeatedly, rhythmically. A sob escaped my throat as I shut my eyes and reached overhead for the emergency call button. No way was I going to watch this shit for even a second more. I needed it to end. My finger kept jabbing at the button, not stopping even when the chattering seemed to have ended. "Sir, are you okay?" I jumped. My heart nearly gave out at the sound of that voice. With extreme caution, I opened my eyes and saw a flight attendant leaning over me with a look of concern on her face. "Is everything all right?" she asked again. "Yes," I exclaimed. "There's a woman outside." Outside?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. "Yes," I said. "Right there." I pointed out the window and felt my stomach sink when I realized that no one was there. I leaned against the glass, turned my neck around, but there was absolutely no sign of her. She'd vanished, and it didn't surprise me. "Sir, are you sure you're okay? Are you in need of medical assistance?" I shook my head, forcefully. "No, it's fine. Just had a very vivid nightmare. I apologize for disturbing you." She smiled. "It's okay. Please don't hesitate to call if you need help." "Thank you." As she walked away, I rested my head on the seat and sighed. What had I just seen? Was it a nightmare? A hallucination? Must have been. There was no other rational explanation. Couldn't be. I glanced at the old woman seated next to me. She was still snoring. Slept right through everything. Yeah, a nightmare, I mused, and turned off the light overhead, plunging the cabin into darkness once again. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. I was snuggled under the sweat-soaked blanket, and my nerves had just begun to settle when I heard it again. It started off low, distant, like it was coming from the top of a cliff far away. But it got louder. The chattering of teeth, like the noise of an angry rattlesnake makes, but much more metallic and predatory. I sat up straight, tense shoulders, eyes wide. I listened closely, trying to trace the source of that sound. It sounded like she was inside the cabin. I tried to swallow whatever spit was left in my mouth, but the lump in my throat refused to allow that to happen. No, it was the same last time. It sounded like she was in the cabin then too, but she'd been outside. I whipped my neck around, scanned the cabin as much as my eyes and my position would allow. There was no sign of her. But of course there wasn't. She'd been lying down on the wing when she first started moving towards me. Just then, almost as if she could hear what I was thinking, I felt a hand on my leg. My mouth dropped open. I tried to scream, but I was so scared. No sound came out. A pale white hand was gripping my shin, tightly twisting my leg muscles and making my very bones ache. And another hand on the other leg this time. The vice-like grip on my legs tightened, forcing them apart. That's when I saw her, sliding out from underneath the seat in front of me. She began climbing up on me. Her teeth continued to chatter maddeningly. Finally finding my strength, I let out a scream so piercing it woke everyone in the cabin, and that woman slithered off, somehow disappearing under the very same seat she had crawled out of, like water swirling down an unclogged drain. Lights began to get switched off one by one, and slowly scared whispers and grumbling filled the cabin. I stayed awake the rest of the flight. I had to apologize profusely to the flight attendants and my fellow passengers. I told them I wasn't well, that the stress was getting to me, but I wouldn't be troubling them anymore. Someone a couple of rows back even offered me a pill for my anxiety. I declined and sat on an empty seat near the flight attendants, scared out of my wits, but not letting it show. By this time, I'd already made my decision to never get on a plane ever again. But something else happened. One last chapter of this nightmare that cemented my decision. Morning had come. The flight had landed. The passengers were getting off one by one. I was last. I wanted to take my time, apologize to, and thank the flight attendants for all their help. The one I spoke to was the same one who had come to my help the previous night. She smiled as I stammered through my groveling apology and told me it was okay, that I need to take better care of myself. I smiled and began walking off. Chills racked my spine. A sound. That sound. I turned around and saw the flight attendant staring at me with wide, dead eyes. Her mouth was moving.